Welcome back, Panther fans. I'm David Brown here with Ryan Graham.
Hey, y'all.
Tim Thurber.
Hello.
And this is State of Atlanta.
Oh, my beer was oh shit. Yep, there it is.
With special guest.
Beer's going everywhere again.
The voice of Georgia State, Dave Cohen. Dave, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Great to be on with you guys.
So a little Facebook post that you made over the weekend was you just concluded your 40th season covering Georgia State sports.
It's only a few, right?
Well, I went back and looked, and if I have my math correct about my friends' ages here, I was 6 years old when you started covering Georgia State. Tim was 3, and Ryan was merely a glimmer in his father's eye at that point. So, what's it like, man? Like 40? What was it? How did you get started? What got you into it? How was that first thing about getting into Georgia State covering sports?
Well, I wanted to go to Georgia State because of WRAS.
Right.
When I moved to Atlanta, I forget how I became familiar with it, but I remember listening to a couple of Georgia State basketball games while I was in high school, and I finished at Walton High School out in East Cobb. And at some point, I decided I wanted to do radio, and Georgia State made total sense. I wanted to work while I was in school. I wanted to be in the big city instead of going to a small city and a college in a small town. So, I can still remember I graduated Walton, early, and then my mom took me down to Georgia State, and must have been the spring of 1982. And I think I started in the fall. I either started in the spring of 82 or the fall of 82. That first day we were there, we went by the radio station, and I met a couple of folks and got involved. And, who knew I'm still involved in that place 40 years later. It's been a great experience. I never thought I'd be at Georgia State for 40 years. You always figure you're going to go off and be the voice of the Boston Celtics or the voice of the Red Sox or something like that. I'm from the Boston area, so that was, that's always one of those things that lurks in the back of your mind as far as goals.
Right.
I ended up, working radio full time while I was in school, and then while I was out of school, and then I met my wife at Georgia State, and so 15 years turned into 20, which turned into 25, and I was telling you guys off air, every year when we leave the baseball tournament, this year it happened to be after a 12th inning walk-off home run over the fence and the train tracks in left field there at Biscuit Stadium.
Painful.
Heartbreaker.
Yeah, it was. But I went back to the hotel, grabbed my stuff because you never want to check out too early. The team was leaving on the bus at 6:30, so I got on the road a little bit about 6, and I got on the road, and it was like, it hit me that I have nothing Georgia State game-wise, football, basketball, baseball, until football, and this was the end of year 40. So I was thinking about that as I was driving back up 85 from Montgomery to Atlanta, that 40 years are in the books, and never thought it would be 40 years, but here we go. Look, headstrong into 41, knock on wood, and the next year of Georgia State football.
Yeah, you thought you had nothing Georgia State related until I messaged you on Facebook and said, "Hey, man, you want to come on the podcast and talk about Georgia State?"
We're casual, though. We probably going to ask you a little bit more about KISS. So,
well, then it'll be a good podcast.
It can't be. I tried. So my wife is one of the crafty folks, and she made our logos and our shirts and stuff like that. And I was like, like 5 hours ago, I was like, what are the chances? I showed her the KISS logo, just the letters, like KISS. And I'm like, what are the chances you can make a GSU version of this logo and print me a shirt tonight just to have a KISS shirt for a KISS Georgia State shirt for Dave? And she just looked at me and was like, no. So
not good.
Well, listen, you guys are better dressed than I am when we record the Panther Insider podcast. You at least have shirts with your logo. We don't have that for the Panther Insider podcast.
Well, I know you don't do video, right?
No, they're all audio.
Yeah, that's good.
You could just say you have shirts.
But you're
There you
better
go.
you're
dressed
wearing
than we
all
are
blue.
anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I put this. Normally, it's just a regular T-shirt, a Georgia State T-shirt. But yeah. Anyhow.
I'm wearing Georgia State.
Nice.
Yeah, you are. You're
Mine-
pimping. You're
mine's-
repping.
mine's
You're
dirty.
repping
I
it.
just put it on.
Yeah.
Pulled it out of the hamper and threw it on.
This is my second Georgia State shirt of the day because I have a 11-month-old, so I put on the first Georgia State shirt that was the one that's prepared for the kid to puke all over it, and then I would change into the actual Showtime shirt. But hey, I've got a bunch of questions, guys, for Dave, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So if you guys have got one, I know Tim, I know you had one on deck. You wanted to talk about. Go for it.
Yeah, sure. So, Dave, I mean, you've been here 40 seasons of Dave, right? You got seen a lot of special moments in Georgia State athletics. I know you can't name one, so maybe name like your top 3 all time over the last 40 years of calling Georgia State athletics.
Well, with basketball and football, you could break it down by sport per
Sure.
se. Certainly in basketball, and I've said this before in some other pieces that Mike Holmes and I had done a few years ago. The one piece of audio I wish I had was in 1983 when Georgia State was 0-5, coming out of a road trip that was Oklahoma, SMU, and then Tennessee. We were 0-5 by the time we got back to Atlanta, and then got on the bus and went up to Knoxville and beat Tennessee on a last-second Tony Graham shot, 52-50. And I've got the newspaper clippings. I've got somebody sent me the Knoxville sports page, which I still have downstairs in the basement. The one thing that I don't have, and I would have had to have been really recording it on a tape recorder right next to me, but I don't have the final call of that. I can close my eyes and see the shot because I don't know if you're familiar with Stokely Arena, the old home of Tennessee basketball, but you would walk to the back of the arena, go up some stairs, and then walk out kind of over the arena. So you were really looking down on the floor, which was kind of cool. And I wish that I had the audio from that. That was really Georgia State's first. Well, it was the first win over a Power 5, but it was really the first best win other than the win in 1963 over College of Charleston, which was the program's first win. And
52-50. That's a low scoring game.
yeah, it was. And Mike Perry and I used to go back and forth about various Georgia State teams. He would always challenge me by giving, what are your 5 best players? What are your who's your best 5 starting 5? And that team that beat Tennessee was 6-22 at the end of the year. But I'm telling you, I know they were sick. I know, but I'm telling you, if you gave that team Eric Irvin, who I still see downtown periodically at Peachtree Center, Eric Irvin was the point guard. Tony Graham was the 2. Shabello Holmes was the 3. Reggie Chenault was the 4, and Brent Hagwood was the 5. I'm telling you, if you gave that 5 and those bench players to Lefty or Ron Hunter, they would have won 18 to 21 or 22 games. It was a good roster, but from a coaching standpoint, it was a mess. And, Georgia State was just in a totally different place back in 1983.
Right.
If you gave those guys what the current players have, it would be a pretty good starting 5. So, but that win over Tennessee was, certainly the greatest first Power 5 win. Then you could fast forward to Bob Reinhart, who we just inducted into the Georgia State Athletics Hall of Fame. And, I would go back to, you said 3 games. I would put it at 3 games in DeLand, Florida in 1991 when we went down there and beat 3 teams we were 0-6 against during the regular season.
Oh, wow.
And Georgia State had never won a conference tournament game in the Transamerica. We went in and beat Stetson, which was the host team. In those days, schools bid on the tournament, so you were playing a home team on their home floor. We beat Stetson, we beat the University of Texas at San Antonio, and then we beat Arkansas Little Rock, and we were 0-16 against Little Rock all time. many of the games were blowouts, and we beat them by 20. And that's how Georgia State got to their first NCAA tournament against Arkansas in the Omni. So that whole weekend, those 3 games in 3 days was, something that we had never seen before. Georgia State, I mean, let's be honest, Georgia State basketball from a record standpoint was terrible back in those days. But I didn't care. I was young, and I was traveling with a Division I program, no matter how much Division I we were at the time.
Sure.
We're still playing at Oklahoma. We're still playing at SMU. We're still playing at Tennessee. We played at Georgia, played at Georgia Tech. We were still playing at places.
Right.
And it was, it was exciting at the time. Not that it's not still now, but at the time when you're 19 or 20 years old, 21 years old, it was really exciting to be doing that.
Yeah, Stetson, that was Tim, wasn't that your freshman year? Was it Stetson? Is that where you first started college?
Freshman, sophomore years, I did go to Stetson University. I actually did not know Georgia State was in the same conference. I didn't when I came to Georgia State, I was like, oh, they're in the same conference. That's kind of cool. I've actually played in the pep band at Stetson and probably watched Georgia State play Stetson, probably beat them because we weren't very good in 98, 99. So that's kind of funny.
Our paths actually could have crossed, and we just didn't know each other back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Ryan, being the uber libertarian, he's like that guy that thinks that privacy is like the most important thing in the world. Whereas I wish that our phones would like secretly like ping every other phone, and so that when you finally like add someone's phone number, it tells you all the times you guys have been in the exact same area like in the past. Like you could find out where your paths had crossed over the years. I think that'd be super cool. Ryan thinks that's a massive invasion of privacy.
Oh yeah,
and no one should ever.
Super cool, super creepy, very massive invasion. Like I get that email from Google every now and again that's just like, oh, here's everywhere you went last month, and it's like a map of what I did, and I'm just like, guys. I know you're collecting it, but don't send it to me. Like, you don't, come on.
Anyway, you could fast forward. I mean, I know you said 3 games. It's too hard to do. You could fast forward to Lefty Drizel's 5 years and 10 games. Fast forward to 8 years of Ron Hunter. I mean, it was, it got much more progressively better as we went from coach to coach with a few hiccups here and there, I mean, Lefty had some great wins. Even Mike Perry had a great win one night at Auburn.
Well, you talked about like a coach making a difference with the players, and we got to see that more recently with Ron Hunter taking over that Rod Barnes team that was not doing so hot, and they came in and just they won like 20 games that year or something.
Yeah, they won 22 that first year with all of Rod Barnes' players. Yeah, so I saw that with Lefty. Lefty took over Carter Wilson's team and had 5 straight winning seasons, including the 29-5 team in 2001. Ron Hunter did it. Rob Lanier kind of picked up, I think, where Hunter left off. If not for COVID, I think Lanier would have had, at least 2, possibly 3 20-win seasons in his 3 years there. And you guys know we should have beaten App State, 3 years ago, and he would have had his back-to-back NCAA tournaments. And, I'm hoping for the same for Jonas. The situation has just changed a little bit because, the Sun Belt has gotten progressively better in the time that we've been in it with with the teams that have been subtracted and now the teams that have been added. So
you made a comment about, Georgia State being like just, garbage in basketball for all those years. And they were. You and I think one of the first conversations you and I had, I think it was at 6 Feet Under at a Ron Hunter event back like maybe his first or second year there, and we were talking and I made a comment about it had to be second year because we were doing good, and I made a comment about like you covered a lot of bad basketball like over your tenure, and like how does it feel now to cover a team that's actually like a good winning program? And you said something. I think you said that you had talked to your wife and you said, I may go down in the record books as for calling the most college home losses or college team losses in all of history. How does it feel now to see, Georgia State basketball really just like making that turn and being a very competitive basketball program, making the tournament in so many years in just a short amount of time?
Well, I will tell you that prior to Lefty, Georgia State, of all the Division I programs, had the worst winning percentage of any D1 program. And Lefty kind of brought us out of that. And I used to tell my wife, if anything happens, here lies Division I's losingest radio announcer.
Well, thankfully,
Yeah,
nothing happened, and thankfully, the thing that happened was we got better at at basketball.
Well, and look, and now we know it's not your fault because we know we can do well even when you're here. So, like, we're not like, go home, Dave.
But a lot of times they do wink, wink, blame the radio guy for certain things. But
oh man, I don't think so. I think that the fan base for all the haters and all the guys that just don't make any excuses or anything. Like, everyone is a big fan of Dave Cohen. Everyone's a big fan of The Voice. So it's not you. And if it is you, so be it. We'll take it. As long as you're calling the games. I'm trying to figure out an app and a way I can get an app on my phone or my TV where I can the delay in game from your call and the actual video broadcast of the game. I can just like sync them up and just do that, because I would love to listen to you call the games and watch the game live. There's a lot of Georgia State fans that don't even watch Georgia State games. They just listen to your audio call because it's better than watching the game. So
I appreciate that. And there is a way to do that. There's a guy my wife knows how to do it, but the radio guy at Louisiana Monroe always posts this image of how to sync the radio and the TV broadcast. If someone wanted to go ahead and turn it down.
I refuse to give anybody from that state credit for anything, so I'm just going to go ahead and erase. I'm going to erase that bit of this conversation. I'm not going to release this in the podcast.
The radio guys are pretty cool, though.
I'm sure they are.
Do they live out of state? Are they like over in Mississippi or something?
No, Texas? They live in Louisiana. One's in Lafayette, one's in Monroe.
Oh, that's horrible.
Well,
what is
nobody's perfect?
No, but what I was going to tell you is, and this is selfless promotion of the Panther Insider podcast, and I forget which number it is because I've done most of them. Mike Holmes did, I think, 2 or 3 of them when they pertain to golf. But if you go back and listen to the Panther Insider podcast where I interviewed Dr. Sherman Day, and Dr. Day served as athletic director when I first got to Georgia State, went on to become the interim president at Georgia State, as well as the interim president at a number of different institutions around the state, but really has been a Georgia State person from the get-go, from 1967 on. If you go back and listen to that podcast, and they're only about 30 to 40 minutes, you'll get a really good idea of what Georgia State athletics faced back in the late 60s, early 70s, all the way up through the early 80s as to why it took so long for Georgia State athletics, not just basketball, to get on solid ground so that we could begin the point of getting to where we are today. It's really, really interesting. He goes into pretty good detail about, at that time, President Noah Langdale and President Bill Suttles. Georgia State athletics was there, but it wasn't supported to the level that it should have been at the time. And a lot of that was because of financial reasons. And so it really wasn't until Dr. Carl Patton became president at Georgia State that things really started to kick into gear. And then when Dr. Mark Becker took over, it really kicked into gear because Dr. Becker knew as much, if not more, about college athletics than just about anybody on campus and was gung-ho about it.
And he came to games. He was always at basketball games in his members only jacket. You saw him just sitting there in the crowd with the stands, not courtside, not on the floor. He was sitting in the stands with fans and everything, just watching the game, which I thought was great. So I'm going to do my best to remember to go find that episode of the Insider Podcast, and I will put it in the description in the podcast and the YouTube video of this release, so anybody watching and listening can go and find that. Has there been?
I will
any,
say,
oh.
Dr. President Blake also does. He sits on the court. He does sit courtside, but he brings his whole family, and he makes it like it definitely doesn't feel like a chore watching him come to basketball games. So I'll give, we gave Becker the shout out. I feel like Dr. President Blake deserves it too.
Yeah. Georgia State's just
President
really
Blake.
interesting from a historical perspective, because for those folks that don't know, Noah Langdale was an All-American football player at the University of Alabama. So he had a distinguished athletic background, but at Georgia State, Georgia State in the early days was not set up to be fraternities, sororities, big-time athletics program. Georgia State in the early days was basically set up to educate Atlanta's working population. So the emphasis in those days, in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, was not put on athletics. It was put on educating Atlanta's working population. Where can they go get an affordable college education after work 5 nights a week? That's what the mission of the university was. It was not athletic oriented, and I'm not saying it is totally now, but it's way, way more focused on athletics than it ever has been in the past.
Yeah, it kind of amazes me with a lot of colleges, like why they even start sports, to begin with. Like, at that point, all they're doing is they're educating kids. That's what they're there for. It's a college. They don't have huge enrollments, or they don't have like in Georgia State's case, like it was a commuter college for so long. It was just a place to go get that education and get back. Why would you even start it? I'm glad they did, but yeah, that's interesting.
It's outreach. It's advertising.
Is there an arena or a? Sorry, go ahead, Dave, please.
No, I was going to say it was. I'll leave it at this. It was best described to me by the then head of fundraising at Georgia State that college athletics, whether at Georgia State or ultimately at any other university, should be viewed as the front porch to your university. It's the one thing that people, after they've graduated, will come back and be connected to if it's done the right way. So,
we can go into a long conversation about it not being done the right way at Georgia State.
It's a good caveat. Good caveat.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Like, I remember when I was in college. I went to college in the late '90s, early 2000s. For way too many years, and to not get a doctorate. And I was not a sports kid growing up. I wasn't a fan of sports. Not because I didn't like it, just my family wasn't sports fans, so I didn't grow up with it. And so when I graduated high school, ended up at State my sophomore year, I would go to UGA, go to Athens. A good friend of mine went to Virginia Tech and Blacksburg, and I would visit them on the weekends, and I'd go to football games. I'm like, man, if Georgia State ever gets a football team, I'm going to be the, front row, 50-yard line. I'm going to be the biggest supporter that I can be of this, because this is so much fun. And never thinking in my wildest dreams that Georgia State would actually have a football team. And then I guess, what was it? Well, now like almost 15 years ago when we first started playing football, I was like, oh crap, I got to do this. And I tried to go to buy those 50-yard front row seats. And I was like, 35-yard line's not that bad. That's still being a pretty good fan. And that's where I was in the Georgia Dome. And I loved it. And then Ron Hunter came, and I was like, oh, basketball's cool too. And so got basketball season tickets and started supporting that. And now I'm just like, looking at baseball and beach volleyball, 2 successful programs. And I just, hell, we do this podcast. Like, I've become a huge fan of the school that I went to 20 years ago because of athletics. It's fun.
Your 5-year plan includes PAC president now.
We'll see about that.
But
we can give you a big what if.
We talk about this all the time. The
best
thing we get out of athletics is the connections that we got, is like us being friends and knowing you, Dave, and getting to see everybody and all the different connections that we made. Whatever happens on the field or the court, it's great. But we have a good time tailgating, basketball and football, and a good time just hanging out with each other. So,
well, this is another big what if that came out of that podcast with Dr. Day. So the 96 Olympics are over. Fulton County Stadium is just sitting there. It's almost deja vu what happened after the Braves vacated Turner Field for Cobb County. Olympics are over. If Georgia State, big if, this is a big what if Georgia State had the say Mark Becker was president in 1994, 95, 96.
Where are you going, Dave?
Georgia State would have been potentially in position to take over Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. And where would we be now if we had started football in 95, 96?
Dave, I have never heard
where
that
UCF
before.
Is. And UCF,
you're getting me
UCF.
You're getting me chill bumps, and you're getting me really frustrated at the exact same time. Oh man. So you're saying Braves move into Turner Field, Georgia State takes over the chop shop, and now we have football, we have baseball, we have everything. Oh man, you're blowing my mind.
The problem was Georgia State, from just a university standpoint at that point, could not have done it.
Not ready.
Yeah, not
wrong mindset, like just none of it. Not ready for anything.
The support's not there. The support's not there from the university. In other words, you don't have a president who's looking to go in that direction. They were okay playing basketball in the sports arena, and baseball.
We could have been
schlepping out to Panthersville in those days, like we still are.
We could be a Big 12 team right now.
Could have.
We could be doing what UCF did. We could be accepting an invitation to the Big 12 and playing there. That's crazy. You blew my mind, Dave. All right, somebody else has a question. I gotta recoil from this. I gotta chill out. So,
Ryan, what you got?
I don't have questions. I told you guys I wasn't going to prepare for this.
I don't know questions.
All right, cool.
I'm the killer.
Question, but I was trying to get out. Dave, has there been in your tenure there? Has there been a stadium or an arena or something you've gone into that you were just awestruck? For me, recency bias. I'm going into Alabama on that first year of having football, or RJ's first season going into Duke. I don't know if we'd played Duke before then up there while you were calling or whatever. But has there been a stadium?
I was not at that game.
You were not. Then why were you not at the bar with us?
I was with Bill Curry in football in Orono, Maine. That was Coach Curry's last game as head coach.
Yeah. Man. Thankfully, the sportscasters get to be in heated and air-conditioned rooms, so you wouldn't have to deal with it being that bad.
I sent a friend of mine who I'd worked with at Furman, who was doing some fill-in work for me. I sent him to Durham, and he did that game on the radio. RJ's game against Duke.
Right.
I didn't make it to Duke until I went with Rob Lanier a couple of 3 years ago when we played up there. 4 years ago, however long it's been though.
So is there any arena that you were kind of awestruck in? This is so cool just to be in this arena, be in this press box at this place?
Yeah, there's been a few places. I've been fortunate to go to Hawaii twice with basketball, and I'd seen the Stan Sheriff Center on TV so many times watching late night West Coast basketball. And not that it's this awe-inspiring arena, but a place that I had seen on TV so many times on those late night ESPN games, to actually be at the Stan Sheriff Center not once but twice. I've done 5 games in there now. Was kind of cool. Georgia State, when Lefty was here, we played New Mexico at the Pit in New Mexico, which was kind of cool.
The
Pit.
That doesn't sound like a nice place.
Well, it's actually one of those. It's a checkbox arena.
Cool.
To go to. I remember going, I forget what year it was. Bob Reinhart was the head coach. It was either a Monday night or a Tuesday night. It was the only top 25 team in action. And Georgia State played at Wyoming against the preseason player of the year. You probably don't remember his name, but you can look him up. Fennis Dembo. was on the
What a
cover of
great name.
Sports Illustrated. He was on the cover of SI in the preseason issue. And to be at the Dome on the Range was pretty cool. Obviously, being at Stegman Coliseum in Athens was great. And, some of the other places. You mentioned all the football stadiums have been cool, from Oregon to Washington. I've been to Alabama twice. I had been to Clemson when I was working with Furman University on their football radio network. So I'd been there a couple of 3 times. Penn State was cool, finally getting to Happy Valley. Wisconsin and going to Camp Randall
That game
was pretty
sucked,
cool.
though.
Yeah.
Well, we could have won that game.
But no, I was saying the Penn State game. That was
State
pretty
game.
crappy
Oh,
with
yeah.
The timeout.
Well, everybody made a big deal about that. You either
didn't
get
need to
beat
do it.
51-0 or 51-3. To me, it wasn't that big of a deal.
Well, the thing about that, Dave, was I later in the season, like maybe it was 2 or 3 games later, maybe it was 6 or 7. I can't remember how long it was. Penn State was a projected national championship team that season, and they lost to whoever they lost to later in that season, and the players just like hung their heads and started walking down the tunnel to leave, and their head coach was grabbing them like, no, go out there, shake hands, high five, do the sportsman-like thing, and show that you're a man of respect, a man of honor, whatever. And so people were talking about how great of a coach this was, how great of a good coach this is. And this one news show that I watched, and it wasn't even a guy that I like on the news show, he was like, didn't that guy just like ice a kicker on a 51-point lead to end the game to keep the like, this guy's not about that. He was just trying to do it for the TV, whatever. And I was like, I'm glad someone else saw that was just a bunch of crap that night. So.
Well, and what sucks for them is I was up there, and I went up there with a person who graduated from Penn State. He brought his kid to the very first Penn State game that he's been to ever, his adult child. It was like a homecoming thing for him. And we tailgated all day, and the hospitality up there was great. One of the nicest fan bases I've met. Everyone was super great in the stadium. I loved all the cheers. I was so impressed with everything. And then they iced the kicker, and I'm like, God, I think you might have spoiled the whole thing. I had so much good Penn State energy.
That is James Franklin. That's his MO. Like, he's known to be like that. So,
and Knoxville was great, but I so wanted us to kick that field goal late to get to 41 points. We didn't. And it was like, it's not so much from bad sportsmanship, but I'm like, did Tennessee give a rat's behind in 2012 when they put 51 up on the board against us the first time we went up there? Well, kick the field goal and let's put 41 on them.
Right.
Well, I remember that game, that first game. We were either, I think it was no score or something after the first quarter, because Ryan and I weren't like, buddies back then, but we knew each other from just Georgia State tailgating and stuff. And I'm sitting there in my stands, and like at the end of the first quarter, Ryan's walking up. We make eye contact. And we both kind of like shrug, like, what the hell's going on? There's no score yet. And yeah, then the wheels broke off. I guess they wanted to make sure that they knew what happened.
Depth is an issue at that level, right? I mean, like, and when you're FCS, especially, have fewer scholarships. But our first string can hang with the big boys. But as soon as you start looking at depth, you get. I mean, that's why second halves always look way different.
Yeah. Well,
I
still want that field goal.
Yeah.
Still.
I wanted us to be the
I don't think that Tennessee will be scheduling us anytime soon in football again.
And Auburn won't either.
No.
And Auburn won't either. Actually, it was funny during that game. I remember the Auburn game. I was checking my Twitter at halftime, and someone popped up and said that Georgia State is like 30 minutes away from never getting blacklisted by every SEC team right now. And I thought that was funny.
Wouldn't that be great? That would just be fantastic. I mean, it'd be bad for whoever does our budgeting, but it'd be good for everyone else.
All right, we got a Patreon comment here, Dave. Trent Miles could have learned a thing or two from James Franklin about icing the kicker.
Look, we've got a good history of icing kickers. All right, I mean, Bill Curry was excellent in App State icing that kicker. He
that was
stopped the
Trent.
kick from happening.
That was Trent. That was Trent.
Oh,
I think
shoot,
that's
you're
what
right.
John's
Trent,
talking about.
yeah.
That was
I'm drunk.
Trent. Yeah. Were you
not
up there?
drunk.
Were you up there for that that App State
Prison
game where
yeah.
where Trent iced the kicker for all 3 timeouts going into the half during the blizzard?
Yeah.
You
that
must
was
have
another.
you must
What was the final in that? Was that final 51-0 too?
something like that. It was
not
it was
good.
absurd. It was absurd.
Yeah, that's the game where
yeah.
So Harper LaBelle and I are sitting there in the radio booth, getting ready for that one. And all of the, or many of the App State players, it was a driving snowstorm. And all of the, or some of the App State players come out for their pregame warmups without a shirt on. And that's when we knew it was going to be a long, long day.
Yeah.
Our guys, for whatever reason, and I'm not a player, so I sympathize. Those are tough conditions to play in. That's a definite home field advantage for an App State football team, for those guys to be able to play in those conditions much more than anybody else does. That was foreign to us. We were playing in the Georgia Dome in those days. On every kickoff, 72 degrees here at the Georgia Dome in downtown Atlanta, and we're underway here, Georgia State against so-and-so.
What did you think about, so at the Georgia Dome, they set it up so that the Falcons visitor locker room was Georgia State's home locker room, but then we were putting, that meant that we were putting our opponents in the Falcons locker room. What did you think about that setup and that whole thing about playing in the Georgia Dome? What was it like playing in the Georgia Dome? What was it like calling games in the Georgia Dome?
Well, early on, it was cool. That first season, it was pretty cool. There will never be another Georgia State football game. You remember the Foreigner song, Feels Like the First Time, if you're old enough to remember the band Foreigner. I mean, nothing will ever be like that first game on September 2 of 2010, if you were there.
It's magic, right?
It wasn't even
sure.
just it wasn't even just a Georgia State sports event. It was a city of Atlanta event. Everybody showed up because they wanted to be able to say they were at the first game. And it was great. And then things went downhill from there because we lost to Lambeth in week 2, which still pisses me off because the school folded. So in the media guide, it will forever show us 0-1 against Lambeth. But we ended up limping to 6-5. Thank goodness we beat Lamar in the final regular season home game, because that next week was the trip to Alabama that we lost 63-7. But that first year, it was pretty cool. It was new. But I got to be honest, years 2 and 3, when we were, we went from 6-5 to 3-8. I forget, it was either 1-11 or 0-12 or whatever it was. I mean, people weren't showing up. The novelty had worn off, and we were struggling. And it was fun, but it was not fun, if you catch my drift. Because at the end of the day, David, I'd say this no matter what, from someone who'd been at Georgia State for many years and who thought we would never have football, I would take football under those conditions as opposed to not having it at all.
Well, and I'll tell you what, the tailgates were great.
That's awesome to hear. I love to hear that. That you would, because I agree. I want football at all costs. I mean, we're in the South, we're in the deep South, and if you don't have football, you're not really doing anything. And that's no disrespect to the other sports, the basketball, which has been great, baseball, which is great, beach volleyball, which is killing it. All other sports, they're great, but deep South, if you're not playing football, you're not getting any attention at all. But I agree. Those games, that first game, I went there and I had 8 season tickets. I bought with a group of friends. We all bought them together, and I had 2 friends that came with me, and neither one of them went to Georgia State. They just came for the fun. And they said, neither of them went to colleges that had football. And they said, we are adopting Georgia State as our football team because of how awesome this experience is. Like a month later, they ended up moving to New York, so they were out. But that was but also going to those games, you went there and it was cavernous. It was just no one there. I mean, it was a bummer.
I always felt if we could have just averaged 10,000 fans a game, not 25, not 50, not 30. if we could have just averaged about in and around 10,000 a game. But it was tough to do based on the fact that we were an FCS independent and then 1 year in the Colonial, and you're not bringing in opponents that are going to bring a large crowd and sell a lot of tickets.
Maine.
Yep.
Right.
You know, I remember doing an article one time for, it's still around. If you remember Score Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. I do.
Now it's a website, but they used to publish, and a pretty good one at that. They used to publish a weekly paper. And so they asked me to write a column on my thoughts on Georgia State football. And, the last line of the column that I wrote was, on a given Saturday when Georgia's hosting LSU or Alabama and Georgia Tech is hosting Clemson or Florida State, will you come downtown to watch Georgia State play James Madison or Rhode Island at that time in the Colonial or Jacksonville State? Let's be honest. That's always
I love
our
the quiet
challenge
dig at
has
James
always
Madison.
been being a mid-major or group of five. Lefty hated it when I would refer to things as mid-majors, but that's what we are. That's what we were, and that's what we are. We're a group of five program operating in a major market with a lot of competition for the sports entertainment dollar.
Sure.
As everybody knows. I mean, I'm not saying anything nobody knows.
Right. No, you're right. And I said the same thing. Like, when we started playing football and I saw the teams we were playing against, I'm like, I'm glad we're playing football, and I'll take that over not playing football. But this is not going to be a draw in Atlanta. And honestly, I'll say the same thing about the conference that we're in right now. I say honestly, as if it's not been very publicly put out there that I hate our conference.
I mean,
it's a good league.
Conference, it's a quality. I will say it's a quality. I would be stupid if I said it's not a quality G5 conference. It's just not the conference that. And I'm Dave. I don't want to put you on the spot saying anything. This is just my opinion. It's not the conference that Georgia State belongs in. This is just we are an outlier in this conference. I think that we're better suited somewhere else. No one wants to come out to see a Lafayette or a Monroe, or a South Alabama. That's no draw. Like, our best draw is getting out of conference games, and we don't really. We got UNC last year. That was good. Would have been a lot better if we had beaten them, but I don't know. That was not really a question. It was more just a statement.
Well, the one school you could look at, and you guys mentioned them earlier, that you could look at and say, hey, we're trying to follow that model. Because 20 years ago, we were in the same conference with the University of Central Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And they're about to join the Big 12 and play with the big boys and make big boy TV money.
Yep.
We're not quite there yet. But I will say that Dr. Becker, Charlie Cobb, our athletic director, both have done a pretty good job, or a better than pretty good job, positioning us athletically to be where we can best compete based on budget, based on facilities. Some people say, well, we got to get in a different league. Well, where are we going to go Power 5 wise? The SEC is not inviting us. The ACC now is in turmoil.
Right.
We're not going to the Big 10 or the Big 12 or the Pac-12. So if it's not the Sun Belt, realistically, where is it that we would end up going?
Well,
now, everybody thought the American Athletic prior to UCF and Cincinnati and Houston getting out would make sense. It would put us in a league with other large market universities.
Other peers, right?
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, we're going to Monroe, we're going to Troy, we're going to Lafayette, we're going to Hattiesburg, we're going to Boone, we're going to Conway, South Carolina. I mean, we are the largest market school. I think the closest largest market is Mobile. So from that standpoint, the what?
Sorry.
I was going to say, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the two largest markets outside of Atlanta would have to be Mobile and what else?
And
Charlotte?
In conference. That's what my question was. I was going to say,
from a conference standpoint.
San Marcos. I don't know.
San Marcos is a small town halfway between San Antonio and Austin.
Yeah, no.
But they claim those markets just like the trash down south claims Savannah.
Savannah,
I was
right.
gonna say,
Myrtle
if you get
Beach.
the trash down South Savannah, then that's cool, but you can't give them that because Savannah's
Yeah.
cool and they're not.
I mean, Coastal sells Myrtle Beach.
Yeah.
And football stays in Myrtle Beach, and basketball sometimes stays in Myrtle Beach, but it's 20 minutes
By the
away.
way, I was in Myrtle Beach just a few weeks ago. Great vacation spot, garbage. Like no reason to go there, and it's not close off the highway. You exit at the Buc-ee's and you drive for another 45 miles on like 25-mile-an-hour roads. It's horrible.
I think it would be a good spot if they ever decide to move the baseball tournament around. You could play where the Myrtle Beach Pelicans play. And
All right, Dave. I don't want to hate you, Dave. I don't want to hate you. We don't tolerate Coastal around here. I was saying there's a Gulf Shores casino, the Hard Rock or something, has a baseball field that I think a minor league team played at or whatever. I think Conference USA did their tournament there for a while. Gambling beach, like Gulf Beach, not that stupid Myrtle crap, Conway crap. Gambling beach and not being in Conway sounds a lot better for baseball tournament. I would go to that tournament. That sounds like a fun tournament to go to every year.
I'm just saying, if you move it around,
Right.
You could take it to the Pelicans Park one year. You could go to Montgomery. You can't really go to Birmingham because the SEC tournament is there. Do you take it out towards Louisiana?
No.
Hard pass.
Just for a year or two.
Biloxi? I don't know.
Yeah. Do you go to Biloxi? Biloxi had minor league baseball. You go to the park with the Biloxi. I think they were called the Shuckers. I think they were called.
I'll go Biloxi. I got no problem with that. That's fine. We're down with that.
Good
Just
name.
no Louisiana. No Louisiana, no Conway. That's all I'm saying. And casinos, preferably, which Biloxi has.
David
casinos.
hates Coastal, and we keep trying to explain to him that he has now given Coastal like high rivalry status in his book, and he denies it. But Coastal is a rival for David, like a hardcore rival.
Why?
Football?
Well, one,
It took a dump in your toilet.
Back and forth football.
teal is a very, very ugly color, and
Stupid
two,
field.
I am very petty, and I don't like all the attention they got when they won a couple of games last year or 2 years ago. Whenever they were like winning some
David,
games.
I'm petty, and they took a bunch of shits in my bathroom, and I'm still don't have the hatred you have. Dave
But
doesn't know
remember,
this.
we beat them 40. We had a 42-40 win over there a couple years ago.
Yeah,
We did.
Yep. So Coastal's an interesting team because in football, the home team has never won.
Right.
The home team has never won. It's always been the away team. Dave, question for you. What is your favorite sport to cover? Because you've covered everything. What do you like to cover the most?
Yeah, basketball I've done for 40 years, and working with Bob Reinhart was great. Working with Lefty was great. Working with Carter Wilson was good. Working with, really comes down to like the staffs, the coaching staffs. Is it cool and fun to travel with them? Lefty was like traveling with a rock star.
All right.
Sure.
People knew, everywhere we went, sports fans, people who knew college basketball knew who he was. And we had never had that before, so that whole experience was great. Ron Hunter was great because other than I think one season, we were winning every year.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he went to 3 NCAA tournaments in 5 years, 6 years, and won a game.
Yeah.
We created one of the most iconic moments in Georgia State basketball history. 2 of the most iconic moments. RJ's shot,
Mhm.
the ensuing falling off the rolling stool.
I got that bobblehead right here.
I got 2 boxes of them down in my office. But basketball has provided just so many moments under each of those coaches. Bob Reinhart, again, we're walking up Marietta Street. Well, they took the train. The team is taking the train to the Omni station and practicing in the Omni for that first NCAA tournament against the Arkansas Razorbacks. I mean, in hindsight, that was huge at the time for where Georgia State was. I mean, nobody knew who we were. Nobody was familiar with what was going on except a small circle of people.
So did you say they were taking MARTA? What?
Georgia State basketball took MARTA to shoot around and practice at the old Omni. You've been on at the Georgia State station. But the CBS TV crews followed them.
They're like, all right, this is a trip. Let's follow where they go.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big deal at the time.
I want to see the CBS guys holding their cameras, like trying to tap their MARTA card or put their token in and doing everything back then.
They jumped the turnstile.
There was a lot of great moments. And so basketball, I guess, would have to be, because I've done it the longest, would have to be, if I had to rank it. Football has been great for the most part because I never thought we'd had it. And, we were talking about, obviously Coach Curry put us on the map. He was the face of the program. Did we win as many games? No. But that's what happens when you start football, and it's not always going to be a winning product. We did take our lumps. It took us a while to get to where we were 2 years ago, winning 8 games.
Yeah.
And Coach Miles came in, and I got along with Trent really well. I think that he sacrificed his win-loss record in order to bridge the program between Curry and ultimately to Coach Elliott, because Coach Elliott comes in that first year with all of Trent Miles' players and wins a bowl game.
Yeah.
Beats Western Kentucky. Same situation as what Lefty did with Carter Wilson's players and what Ron Hunter did with Rod Barnes's players. The message in the locker room was a little different. The program, turned and went in a different direction under a new head coach, and it worked.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time about how Trent Miles was the guy we needed at the time. He fixed the things that were wrong with what Curry's program was, and he got us to the point that Coach Elliott was able to take it to the next level. And I've got the utmost respect for Trent Miles, and he's one of my top 3 football coaches of Georgia State all-time history. So,
well, he knew what he was into because off air during one of the radio shows that we did, he told me it was a couple of days after it was announced that Georgia State was purchasing Turner Field, and he was excited about it. But he said, look, I'll probably never see the inside of that place as head coach at Georgia State. I will either have won enough that I have moved on, or I will have lost too much and I'm going to get shown the door. And ultimately that's what happened.
That's what I try to explain to fans of other programs at our level. Like the Kennesaw coach got hired away immediately after the NCAA appearance. And I'm like, look, if your coach isn't getting hired away every, 4 or 5 years, he's not very good.
Which, by the way, you may see Trent Miles this year because he's on the staff at LSU.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we will. I will not make. I don't think I'm making that trip because Louisiana sucks as a state. But I am friends with his niece. If that makes any difference, I'm friends with Trent Miles' niece.
I want Minner. I want to see him on our sideline. That's what I want. I know he's way too big for us now. But
Ryan, for Mentor to come to Georgia State, he's gonna have to fail at his career. His career is so good right now. He has to fail to end up at Georgia State.
Yeah.
I saw something on Twitter not too long ago that his name was mentioned with a number of 3 or 4 or 5 other names of those guys who are top coordinators that are in line to be that next generation of head coach. Didn't say what level, but his name was among that group of names that was posted.
He's going to get hired into a P5 program head coach position. I mean, that's how good he is at Michigan. I mean, it's what it is. And he was that good here. I mean, that defense was so much fun to watch because they were so good and so aggressive. I love that defense so much. That's why I want him back, because I just loved watching it.
Yeah, but he might have to take a Billy Napier type path.
Yeah.
And I remember Billy Napier because he was a quarterback at Furman when I was up there, again, doing radio stuff. And, he spends time at Alabama. I think he spent time at both Alabama and Clemson, maybe one other place. But next thing you know, he's named head coach at Louisiana, Lafayette. A lot of success in Lafayette. And, his name 2 or 3 years before going to Florida, his name had been, batted around as a Power 5 potential. And then finally he, for whatever reason, the Florida job came open and it worked out. So
you're telling us that there's a chance to get Minter back then, is what you're saying.
If it's a step, Georgia State for guys like that is a stepping stone job.
I'll take it.
We'd love to be the school that is a stepping stone for.
Like I said, if it's not a stepping stone, you suck. You're not a good coach.
It's a stepping stone job the same way when Lefty Drizel took the job, it was a stepping stone job to retirement.
Sure.
Lefty knew this was his last job. Lefty was not trying to climb any ladders. Ron Hunter, on the other hand, goes from 17 years at IUPUI and helps usher them to a Division I program. Further puts Georgia State on the map from a success standpoint and a wins standpoint. Next thing you know, he's, taking the Tulane job. Georgia State was a stepping stone job in terms of what you pay your head coach. At the time, Georgia State, I think, was paying, somewhere around $500,000 to $600,000. Well, Tulane's throwing around a little over $1 million. Well, of course, it's a no-brainer. You're going to take that.
It's not even a decision. It's just go, right? Yeah.
Same with Rob Lanier.
Yeah, he got like $2 million or something like that to go SMU, right? He got like crazy, ridiculous money to go over there.
He got a 5-year deal for $10 million.
I would take that deal.
That's life-altering money.
Yeah. I'll let my boss know that I will leave for that kind of money, so they need to up it.
I will go full circle with the realignment talk though. That's what convinced me that the AAC, because I was where you were, Dave, saying that, like, why would we go there at this point with the major programs that were the reason to go there are leaving, but their TV money is still like 10 times the Sun Belt.
But will it be now? Next time it comes around for negotiation, when you lose 3 programs like they've lost, and who knows how long Memphis is going to stay in the American Athletic?
I guess they're out.
It kind of where are they going to go?
Yeah.
We got a question from
we'll take them.
Patreon. If you get a chance to ask, as someone that has been around the athletics program for 40 years, I'm curious how adding football and success in basketball has impacted growth of the non-revenue sports. How's the golf and tennis and volleyballs and things been going on? Softballs.
Golf and tennis has always been, over the years, decent. They haven't maybe necessarily years ago had the kind of success that they've had in recent years. Volleyball, and beach volleyball is all relative. The beach volleyball portion of it, as you know, is relatively new. And, bringing back Beth Van Fleet, who's a former Georgia State student athlete, has been, fantastic. They're mentioning soccer as well. Soccer, even going back to Scotty O'Neill, who was head coach when I first got to Georgia State. Soccer, I don't remember how good the Trans-America Athletic Conference and the Atlantic Sun were in soccer back in those days, but Georgia State has always had competitive soccer, competitive tennis, competitive golf. I mean, the head coach at I'm trying to think of his name right now, but we lost our head golf coach at the time to Florida State, and they're about to play for I think they're playing for a national championship.
Yeah, I feel like golf's tailed off a little bit since he left.
Yeah, he's been gone a number of years, and his name will pop in my head here in a minute.
After we log off, you'll remember exactly. You'll like wake up in bed like.
Listen, the one sport, when we talk about moving to another league, the same way, when football transitioned from the Georgia Dome to a revamped Turner Field, now Center Park Stadium, that was a major step. When the basketball team played this first year at the GSU Convocation Center, that was a major step. We were undoubtedly in, even though, look, I love the sports arena, was in it for 39 years at all hours of the night. But, going into the Convocation Center really put us on another level. I say that because we're now in the Sun Belt in a league where just about every team treats baseball as a major sport. The league just got 4 teams in the NCAA regionals. And I think that I think Mike Hurst did a great job considering his challenges back in the day. If you remember Coach Hurst, Greg Frady carried the program to still in 2009, a great weekend at UNC Wilmington and a CAA championship, and the first and still the only regional NCAA that we've appeared in at Georgia Tech, which was a great weekend. And Brad Stromdahl has taken over from Coach Frady the last 4 years, and I think has done a fantastic job. We've had some pretty dadgum good talent on this baseball team, but until we build, and everybody knows this, until we get that new stadium on the site of the old Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, it's going to be hard to raise the level of the baseball program to what I called, and Brad and I talked about this last week in Montgomery, the Sunbelt Baseball Elite, which is Coastal, Louisiana, Southern Miss, Troy, Georgia Southern. They've all got really, really nice facilities. You know, Louisiana Lafayette treats baseball. You know, they average like, I think it's 2,000 or 2,500 spectators per game over there.
Crazy.
They treat baseball like it's a AA minor league ball club.
Same thing in Hattiesburg. Hattiesburg does the same thing, right?
I've not been there for baseball, but yes, they are baseball.
Yeah.
You know,
I have been to 2 baseball games at Panthersville, and I just imagine if they're in Summerhill, I'll go there. Like that'll be my weekend thing. Like I'll take my kids, and that's the weekend. We're gonna go Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're gonna hang out. If it's not all 3 days, it's at least 1 or 2 days. You know, we're gonna go hang out. I agree. I think that, and I think you could draw casual fans. Like, oh, there's just baseball in downtown Atlanta. Let's just go hang out there. If it's done right, if it's marketed right, if the facilities are right, it's going to be a fun time for everyone.
But there's kind of a glass ceiling until that facility is built with regards to becoming an elite program within the Sun Belt Conference, because it is a good baseball league.
Right.
And just about every school has a really, really nice facility.
Yeah. We have good training facility, right? But it's nowhere close to our baseball field.
Right.
You just need to put the field next to the training facility.
Right.
Do you have you been given any indication? Like I've heard stuff, but have you been given any indication into how soon we could expect something to happen down there?
In all honesty, I have not. I've heard different things with regards to how close we are. You know, I was told that in 90s, when was it? Sometime in 96, early 97, when they imploded Fulton County Stadium, that it was imploded after they stripped it of seats and they took everything out of it, and it was just a skeletal structure. When they imploded it, they imploded in. And that underneath that parking lot is all the concrete and everything. And I was told that it would have to be excavated before you could build on top of that site. Whether that's 100% true or not, I'm not 100% sure.
That's what we've been hearing,
Dave. Dave, I'm going to beat my chest a little bit because I think I actually know something that you don't know. It does have to be excavated. There's going to be a lot of dirt that has to be moved, and it's up the cost. Like where we were seeing like original numbers in like the $6 million range, it's moved into like the $30-40 million range of just because of the excavation that has to happen to get it set up for a baseball field and stuff. So
that's why I go back to what we were talking about earlier from the podcast with Dr. Day. If Georgia State takes over Fulton County Stadium, somehow pairs it down, there's your baseball facility right there, and football facility right there.
Baseball,
in 1997.
Could just be Oakland.
Soccer
all up in here.
Pretty much.
Well, then we have to move to Las Vegas because all the teams in Oakland moved to Las Vegas.
Get out of here.
So,
I did. So something very unserious. Something very serious. I should just correct myself. Earlier, you referenced the Convocation Center multiple times. You are the one person who can make this stick. We have been calling it the box. And
You named it. You named the sports arena. Like, it's called the sports arena because you said, "Come on down to the Georgia State sports arena on WRAS." So
I did. All I said
named-
was I'm not calling it the GSU Physical Education Complex. What was it?
It just doesn't roll off the tongue.
The building, and I said
the
that.
right decision.
I said that just does not sound impressive on the radio. We're going to call it the Georgia State Sports Arena, and that's what I started calling it on the radio because anybody who was listening who had never been there would have visions of an arena. Instead of a rec center.
Instead of a high school gym.
Where you walk up to the counter and say, "Hey, can I get a towel and a basketball?" Which is what it was on the second floor.
I'm in. Coach is gonna put me in the second half. Oh yeah. So yeah, like Ryan said, the box. So can you call it the box? And also, Center Park is the park.
Yeah, the park. And we tailgate on the bricks.
Okay, so you guys. So you said you've been to Panthersville twice, right?
Oh well,
we've been a couple more times than that. Just the spring games were there for a couple of years.
Yes, yeah, they were over. Well, they were over at the soccer facility.
Yeah. I mean, you had to drive past.
Okay, so on the radio or on ESPN Plus, I refer to it most of the time as the ballpark at Panthersville.
Okay.
Does that not sound better than the GSU baseball complex?
Well, and I will say that the camera angles that they give are really nice. I was like, what is this facility? And I'm looking around, I'm noticing the little things, and I'm like, oh man, these camera angles are just really good.
And I always try to point out I try to point out like one of my favorite historical parts of Panthersville, because I've got a few sheets of it out in the garage as they've replaced it. But again, going back to Fulton County Stadium, not as much anymore, but initially that blue wall at Panthersville, all of that plywood came from Atlanta Fulton County Stadium.
Wow.
I remember hearing that. Yeah.
That's nice.
You go back and watch old video of the Braves at Fulton County Stadium, you'll see a blue wall. That plywood or that wall was, I guess, I don't know how they did it, dismantled, loaded in a truck, brought out to Panthersville, and they built the outfield fence from that blue wood from Fulton County Stadium.
They're like, give us some of that juice.
If you want a piece of the plywood, I've got extra pieces in the garage here.
I do. Hey guys, we've taken up Dave's time for over an hour. Do you have any more last question? I've one last question, but do you guys have any last questions?
As long as you want to go. I like talking about this stuff.
Well, you know, we'll bring you back. We'll bring you back anytime you're available. Because I know how I feel right now. I know how I feel right now, and I know that these guys have got to go piss right now. So, so we'll do one more round of questions. Ryan has no questions. He never prepares for anything. Tim, do you have any questions?
I'll give you an easy one. You've been to all the Sunbelt schools. Who serves the best media food?
From a basketball standpoint, I think it's probably the Ragin' Cajuns.
That's what they got going for them. That's what the thing that Louisiana has going for it is food. That's it. That's all they got.
All right, football? Same?
Yeah, I mean, they have a pretty decent spread for the Ragin' Cajuns. You know, I will say this, though. The longest break that I have on the radio from pregame all the way to postgame is 2 minutes. So rule number one is we don't eat a lot before we go on the radio.
No.
Because it's going to take me 30 to 40 seconds to get down to the restroom, 30 to 40 seconds to get back to the radio booth. How much time does that leave in between?
Not a lot.
Not a whole lot.
Things we don't think about, but yeah.
Most of our eating is done when we get off the air.
Well, so from what I'm told about the changes to the on the bricks tailgating this year in football is that we will be able to keep our tailgate open during and after the football game for an hour. So when you come out of your press booth and you're hungry, we will have all kinds of very, very cold food for you to eat.
That's right. Stale food that once was delicious.
That's fine because it's better than what we're eating in a lot of cases. But I'll bring Harper. I'll bring Harper, and I'll bring Rick, the engineer, and we will partake and eat the rest of your food.
We do
I
things like
appreciate
barbecue competitions. There's a chili cook-off for the final game of the season. We try to do it up, so the food is usually on point.
Yeah, we'll be good. We'll be good. All right. My final
I
question.
will say
my
we
final question for
do
you,
have
Dave.
to come up. We do have to come up with another name for the Convocation Center, and I'm sure they're working on a name
That's the
sponsor.
box.
The box.
Sorry, Dave.
He's trying to picture in his head saying it on the radio.
Yeah, we need something a little bit something a little bit more something a little bit more related to Georgia State.
Well,
The
if they
blue
would have built
box.
something more related, but what they built was a big box. All right, that's what they got. They didn't give you much to work with.
All right. I'll let you out of here, Dave.
I'll start thinking of
Go.
something.
All right.
Yeah.
My last question is this is how does it feel to be the second most notable Dave when it comes to Georgia State?
Me behind you?
I'm just saying.
He's not saying anything.
I am more than happy and willing to share that space and that spotlight with you.
Thanks, Dave.
No.
Thank you very much for coming on. From the moment we started this podcast, what was it, Ryan? 3 years ago now? I think it's
Something
3
like
years.
that.
When we talked about inviting anybody from Georgia State athletics on, it was always you that we wanted to come on because you've been here longer than any of us, specifically Ryan, like literally longer than him. Yeah.
Oh,
You
then
know
my
it all.
being.
We appreciate
You've seen it all.
Yes.
You said it all.
and we appreciate we appreciate you, man. And future Hall of Famer, Dave Cohen.
I'm just glad we have
Absolutely.
a Hall of Fame at Georgia State in athletics.
Also,
Absolutely.
You'll
that's
be
true.
in it.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate
This
it. And
is-
I've told you guys, I'll be sitting in the office down at Georgia State, and if it comes across on the Twitter or Facebook, I sit there and listen to you guys while I'm working on the computer.
Nice.
We appreciate that, man. Thank you very much.
Very kind.
All the
So, yeah,
important news.
all the BS that comes across. Thanks everybody for listening. We're gonna let Dave go. Ryan, Tim, and I are gonna head over to Last Call, which you can find us on our Patreon page at patreon.com/State of Atlanta. It's free of charge, but you do get early access if you are a member. Also access discounts and merchandise and stuff like that. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, Dave, again for being here. We love it. We mean it. Say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, guys.
Peace.
Appreciate you having me.